President Donald Trump is wrapping up the last leg of his first overseas trip in office. At a two-day G7 summit in Sicily, he's one of several new leaders to join the gathering, which includes the U.S., Canada, Germany, France, Italy, Japan, and the United Kingdom, no longer Russia. Before meetings got underway, the president tweeted, getting ready to engage G7 leaders on many issues, including economic growth, terrorism, and security. Chief White House correspondent Major Garrett is traveling with the president in Sicily. Major, the G7 leaders signed a terrorism declaration, and the president also said they'd talk economic growth. What are some of the big takeaways that you've seen from the summit?
Well, Tony, let me talk about a takeaway that's pretty important that's happening right now. Theresa May, the British Prime Minister, is giving a press conference, taking questions openly from the British press traveling with her. We have been with President Trump since last Friday. Not a single press conference up until now, and one is not scheduled for his last day here in Taormina, Italy tomorrow. It may be added to the schedule, though all of us traveling with the president have our doubts. So I think the contrast is pretty stark.
What do you
Theresa
attribute
May
that to,
and
Major?
other leaders, both the president's reluctance to take questions, pure and simple, to formulate a message about this trip, repeat it as often as possible, but not take any questions, not take any open-aired scrutiny about what he has said, what he hasn't said, what his interactions have been, what the agenda items are. Questions about terrorism, economic growth, trade, climate change, all those things could easily be discussed. And I'm not suggesting that every American president on a foreign trip I've been on has had elaborate press conferences, but they've always had at least some, one or two questions along the way, at least an opportunity, and sometimes one or two or three opportunities to take questions from the White House traveling press corps and others who are assembled there representing other heads of state.
Is the issue that the Trump White House isn't quite sure what it thinks about these various issues yet?
Well, on climate change, that is certainly true. Gary Cohn, the president's top economic advisor, just told us in a briefing, not on camera, by the way, that's another restriction we're dealing with here. A lot of briefings are off camera, so we don't get to see them answering and taking questions, the limited opportunities we have to place them before administration officials. But Gary Cohn, nevertheless, said the president is more knowledgeable about climate change today than he was before. Lots of conversations with the leaders of Europe and Canada about the Paris Climate Accord, and the president hasn't decided whether the United States will stay in that accord. One put together during the Obama administration, signed onto by former President Obama, and one both the Canadians and all the Europeans here desperately want the United States to stay in. Not only symbolically do they believe that's important, but they believe practically it is important for the United States to commit to global reductions in greenhouse gases to address the issue of climate change. And they want this president, a climate change skeptic to be sure, during the campaign, to reaffirm the United States' commitment both to this issue as a matter of science and as a matter of environmental policy. And Gary Cohn, the president's economic advisor, said the president is taking all of this in, intentionally did not decide what he would do with the Paris Accord until after these meetings here at the G7, and will decide sometime in the not-too-distant future. But he said, throughout whatever the president discusses with his top advisors and whatever decision he comes down to, it will be done principally through the prism of economic growth in the United States, not environmental regulation or reducing greenhouse gas emissions globally.
The news broke recently that Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is under FBI scrutiny. It's a person of interest. While the president was overseas, this came out. Any impact on the trip?
No impact on the trip, but certainly an impact within the White House. And this is not exactly new news to the White House. There were stories last week that somebody very significant within the president's inner circle was this person of interest. I had many sources, but no one who really knew for sure, but who thought it might be Jared Kushner, telling me, hey, it's probably Jared Kushner. Well, probably is not a good enough standard. Now we've confirmed through various sources that Jared Kushner is the person of interest. And how could he not be? Before he became a senior advisor to the president, he was the son-in-law during the transition who carried out many meetings with foreign heads of state and several with representatives of the Russian government. He also met with the leader of a bank called VEB, which was sanctioned by the U.S. government and is one of the banks close to the Putin regime in Moscow. How could he not be someone the FBI would at least want to talk to in relationship to this issue and ongoing investigation about Russia, possible collusion, and the Trump campaign? It is not determinative. It doesn't suggest anything about the future of Jared Kushner's role within the White House or what he did or didn't do in the course of that investigation. But it certainly does not come as a surprise to this White House that Jared Kushner is now a person of interest. Does it bring this whole question closer to the president? Quite obviously, Tony, it does.
Now, Jared Kushner did not fully disclose all of his meetings with Russian officials when he was asked to. What is the Kushner position on why those disclosures weren't made initially?
No public explanation about that, Tony, and it's a very important point you raise. All of these, or many of the issues that have been raised during the Trump transition have to do with officials about to take places within the Trump White House not being fully candid and honest and open about various things they did during the transition. Michael Flynn fell into that category for sure. Jared Kushner now appears to have fallen into that category. The attorney for Jared Kushner, Jamie Gorelick, said he will cooperate with the FBI as he has cooperated with Congress, but nothing more about that, no explanation about this lack of candor and openness about his meetings. That in of itself could be an innocent mistake, because you don't know all the things you must do because you're new to government. Certainly those within the Trump world fall into that category generally. I'm not trying to excuse the behavior, but that might be something Jared Kushner and his attorneys may assert in the future. But I will tell you this, Tony. From this point forward, as a person of interest, Jared Kushner better disclose everything, because any slip-up with the FBI could instantly put him in very real legal jeopardy.
Indeed, and Jeff Sessions also on that list of Trump officials and advisors who did not disclose quite everything. Major Garrett for us in Sicily. Major, thank you.
Sure.